Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive
Always a pleasure.
into today's top stories from India.
Yeah, this is going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah, I've got a lot to cover. Sports, economics, international relations, even some legal rulings and tragic incident.
I know. It's a real mixed bag today.
It is.
But that's India for you, right? A nation of
That's
contrasts.
absolutely. Always something happening. Well, we're going to kick things off with what I think is a pretty huge upset in the IPL, the Indian Premier League.
Ooh, you're talking about the Punjab Kings victory.
Right, the Punjab Kings, led by Ricky Ponting, just demolished the Lucknow Supergiants, who, by the way, are coached by Justin Langer.
Two Aussies going head-to-head in the IPL. Who would have thought?
Yeah, real clash of the Titans, and to be honest, I think Ponting really outsmarted Langer in this one.
Well, the scorecard certainly tells that story.
It does. 8-wicket victory for the Kings.
And they finished with 22 balls to spare. I mean, that's a thrashing in T20 cricket.
It is. It is. And, I think a lot of it comes down to the captaincy as well.
Yeah, you can't underestimate the impact of a good leader on the field.
Exactly. I mean, you look at Punjab's captain, Shreyas Iyer. He played an absolute blinder, 52 not out, and he even hit the winning runs, a 6, no less.
Now, that's how you lead by example.
It is. Whereas Lucknow's captain, Rishabh Pant,
Yeah.
he only managed 2 runs before he was sent packing.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt.
It does. It does. And, when your captain isn't firing, it can really affect the morale of the whole team.
Absolutely. It's like a dominant effect.
It is. But, it wasn't just Iyer for Punjab.
Oh, no, they had some other standout performances, too.
They did. Prabhsimran Singh, for example.
Yes, he was on fire.
He was 69 runs off just 34 balls. Incredible striking.
And then Hawat Hera coming in at number 4, he just kept the momentum going.
Yeah, 43 not out off 25 balls. He really finished the job.
And let's not forget Arshdeep Singh. His bowling was instrumental in keeping Lucknow's score down.
Absolutely. 3 wickets for 43 runs. Those are some pretty impressive figures.
Yeah, he kept the pressure on the Lucknow batsmen throughout their innings.
He did. And what I found really interesting about this match was the post-match interviews.
Oh, what did they say?
Both Singh and Wadhira were full of praise for Ricky Ponting.
Really?
They talked about his positive attitude, his focus on winning, and how he's created a really great team environment.
So it sounds like Ponting's leadership is really paying off.
It does. It does. And you contrast that with the Lucknow side, where there were reports of some tension and frustration.
Yeah, well, losing like that can definitely expose some cracks in a team's unity.
It can. Mitch Marsh, for example, he got a golden duck.
First ball out, that's got to sting.
It does. And there was also a dropped catch that could have been crucial.
Those little moments can make all the difference in a close game.
They can. And I think it shows how important it is to have not just individual talent, but also a strong team spirit and a good coach who can bring everyone together.
Yeah, that's the recipe for success in any sport.
It is. And, with this win, the Punjab Kings are now right up there at the top of the IPL table.
Oh, really?
They are. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out.
I know. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Me neither. Well, from the highs of cricket, let's move on to something a little bit more serious.
Okay, what's next on the agenda?
The Indian IT sector.
Ah, yes, the backbone of the Indian economy.
It is, but they're facing some potential headwinds in the form of a possible U.S. tariff war.
Ooh, that's not good news for anyone.
It's not, and particularly not for the big Indian IT firms, companies like TCS, Infosys, HCL Technologies.
Yeah, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, all the big names.
Exactly, and these companies rely heavily on revenue from the U.S.
Yeah, it's a huge market for them.
It is, so any kind of trade war or tariff hikes could have a significant impact on their bottom line.
Absolutely, and it's not just the tariffs themselves, it's the uncertainty they create. Makes businesses hesitant to invest and expand.
Right, and we're already seeing this reflected in growth projections for this sector.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Kotak Institutional Equities and Motilal Oswal Financial Services, they're both predicting a maximum revenue growth of 5% in constant currency terms for fiscal year 2026.
And that's quite a bit lower than earlier projections, right?
It is. NASSCOM, the industry body, had initially projected a growth of 6%.
So there's definitely a sense of caution in the air.
There is, and even JM Financial, who are usually a bit more optimistic, they're only predicting 5.8% growth.
And this is all before the tariffs have even been implemented.
Exactly, so you can imagine the impact if they do come into effect.
It could be quite significant.
It could, and, we're already seeing some signs of a slowdown in the sector.
What do you mean?
Well, NASCOM has reported that growth in the current fiscal year 2025 is only 5.1%.
Hmm, that's not great.
It's not, and it just shows how vulnerable the sector is to external shocks.
Yeah, and this tariff issue could force these IT companies to really rethink their strategies.
It could. They might need to diversify their client base, explore new markets, and maybe even shift some of their operations to other countries.
It's a wake-up call for the industry.
It is. Well, while the U.S. might be putting up trade barriers, it seems like China is doing the opposite.
Oh, really? What's going on there?
China has announced that it's willing to increase imports from India.
Interesting timing, considering the U.S. trade situation.
It is. It's also they're trying to capitalize on the tension between India and the U.S.
Well, they certainly stand to benefit if they can become a more important trading partner for India.
They do, and India has a massive trade deficit with China. We're talking over $85 billion in the last fiscal year.
Wow, that's a huge imbalance.
It is, and right now, India's main exports to China are things like petroleum oil, iron ore, marine products, and vegetable oil.
So, pretty basic commodities.
Yeah, and they only add up to about $16.6 billion.
So, there's a lot of room for growth there.
There is, and this announcement comes at a time when India and China are marking the 75th anniversary of their diplomatic relations.
So maybe there's a bit of a charm offensive going on.
Maybe, maybe. President Xi Jinping has even sent a message talking about the importance of cooperation and peace between the two countries.
But there have been some tensions between them lately, right?
There have, especially over border disputes and economic issues.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
It is, but, I think this offer to increase imports is a sign that China is trying to improve relations with India.
It could be, but it's also a smart move strategically.
How so?
Well, by increasing trade with India, China can reduce its dependence on the U.S. market.
And that gives them more leverage in any trade negotiations with the U.S.
Exactly, so it's a win-win for China.
It is. Well, let's see how this plays out. It'll be interesting to see what specific goods China is interested in importing from India.
And how much they're willing to increase their purchases by...
Absolutely. Now, from international relations, let's turn our attention to domestic politics.
Okay, what's happening there?
There's a lot of buzz around the WAC amendment bill.
I've heard of this. It's causing quite a stir.
It is, and the opposition parties united under the India bloc, they're planning to put up a fight against it.
So this is a big issue for them.
It is. They see it as an attack on the rights of minorities, and they're not going to let it pass easily.
And the India bloc, just to remind our listeners, that's a coalition of all the major opposition parties.
It is. It includes Congress, the Samajwadi Party, the Nationalist Congress Party, and several others.
So they've got some serious political weight behind them.
They do, and they've already held a meeting to discuss their strategy for opposing the bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of the big names were there. Rahul Gandhi, Mallikarjun Kharge, Ram Gopal Yadav, Supriya Sule, you name it.
So they're presenting a united front.
They are, and they're not alone in this.
Who else is opposing the bill?
The All India Muslim Personal Law Board, the AIMPLB, they've also come out strongly against it.
And they're a very influential body, especially when it comes to matters of Islamic law.
They are, and they've called on all secular parties, even those allied with the BJP, to oppose the bill.
Wow, so they're really trying to build a broad coalition against this.
They are, and the AIMPLB president, Maulana Khalid Saifullah Rahmani, he's given several reasons for their opposition.
What are their main concerns?
Well, they argue that the bill is discriminatory, it contradicts several articles of the Indian Constitution, and it could lead to the seizure of Waqf properties.
Those are some pretty serious allegations.
They are, and Waqf properties, those are religious endowments that are meant to benefit the Muslim community.
So the AIMPLB is worried that this bill could allow the government to take control of these properties.
Exactly, and they see that as a violation of their rights.
So what's the opposition's plan now?
Well, they're going to demand a full debate on the bill in Parliament.
They want to make sure their voices are heard.
They do, and they're also going to insist on a vote so that everyone's stance is on record.
So it's going to be a very contentious issue.
It is, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
I'll be watching closely.
Me too. Well, from the heated world of politics, let's move on to a very tragic story.
Oh no, what's happened?
A German tourist has been raped in Hyderabad.
That's terrible news.
It is. It's a 25-year-old woman, and she was attacked in the Mamitapally area.
It's just awful. I can't imagine what she must be going through.
It's heartbreaking, and it really raises concerns about the safety of tourists in India.
Absolutely. Incidents like this can damage a country's reputation and deter people from visiting.
They can, and, you know, this case is particularly disturbing.
How so?
Well, it seems that the accused offered the woman and her friend a ride.
So they didn't know him.
Apparently not. They met him at a market, and he offered to show them around the old city.
And they trusted him enough to get in a car with him.
It seems so, and that's the really scary part.
It is. It is. And then what happened?
Well, according to reports, he took them to Mamitibly, which is a bit outside the city, and then he dropped off the friend, but he kept the woman in the car.
Oh, no. I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, and that's when he assaulted her.
It's just horrific.
It is. It is. But thankfully, the police have arrested the accused.
That's some small comfort, at least.
It is. They managed to track him down within 12 hours.
That's pretty impressive.
It is. And they used photos from the victim's phone to identify him.
So at least justice will hopefully be served.
But we can only hope. And, this woman, she had come to India with a friend. They had arrived in early March, and they were planning to leave on April 3rd.
So their trip was almost over.
It was. It's just so sad that it ended this way.
It is, and it's a reminder that we all need to be vigilant about our safety no matter where we are in the world.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to some more positive news.
Okay, I could use a bit of good news right now.
India and Chile have agreed to start negotiations for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement.
Now that's encouraging.
It is. It seems that India is really looking to strengthen its ties with South America.
Yeah, and Chile is a key player in that region.
It is. And Prime Minister Modi, he actually called Chile India's gateway to Antarctica.
I've never heard it put that way before.
It's an interesting perspective, isn't it?
It is. It highlights the strategic importance of Chile for India.
It does. And during the Chilean president's visit to India,
Gabriel Boric, right?
that's him, they discussed a wide range of areas for cooperation, including critical minerals.
Which are essential for a lot of modern technologies.
They are. And defense manufacturing.
India is becoming a big player in that field.
It is. And then there's food security and resilient supply chains.
Yeah, those are key issues for both countries.
They are. And the Economic Partnership Agreement, it's going to cover a lot of ground.
What are some of the specific sectors they're looking at?
Well, agriculture, renewable energy, railways, space, even digital public infrastructure.
Wow, so it's pretty comprehensive.
It is. They even signed a letter of intent for cooperation in Antarctica.
So that gateway to Antarctica thing is really becoming a reality.
It is. And India is even going to provide training to Chilean military personnel.
That's a sign of a really strong partnership.
It is. And the ultimate goal is to increase trade and investment between the two countries.
Which will benefit both economies.
It will. And they also discuss some global issues, like the need for reforms at the UN Security Council.
Yeah, that's been a long-standing debate.
It has. And they also talked about how to address challenges like organized crime, drug trafficking, and terrorism.
So it's a partnership that goes beyond just economics.
It does. It's about working together to solve global problems.
Well, that's encouraging.
It is. Now, let's shift gears again and talk about a very important legal ruling from the Supreme Court.
Okay, what did they decide?
They upheld the right to shelter.
That's fundamental, isn't it?
It is. And they ordered compensation for some people whose homes were demolished illegally in Prayagraj.
Oh, I remember this case. It was quite controversial.
It was. The Prayagraj Development Authority, they demolished these homes with just 24 hours notice.
Wow, that's incredibly harsh.
It is. And the Supreme Court, they were not happy about it.
They shouldn't be. It's a clear violation of due process.
It is. And they said that this kind of action, it undermines the rule of law, which is a fundamental part of the Indian Constitution.
So they're sending a strong message to the authorities.
They are. They're saying that you can't just bulldoze people's homes without following the proper legal procedure.
And the compensation they ordered, that's a significant sum, 10 lakh rupees to each of the affected individuals.
It is, and it's meant to send a message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated.
I hope it serves as a deterrent.
Me too. And the court also made it clear that notices for demolition, they have to be served properly, either in person or by registered post.
To no more just sticking a notice on a wall and calling it a day.
Exactly. The people have a right to know what's happening and to have a chance to challenge it.
It's a victory for justice.
It is. And it shows that the Supreme Court is willing to stand up for the rights of ordinary citizens.
Even against powerful government bodies.
Even then. Now, let's go back to the U.S. for a moment.
Okay, what's the latest there?
Well, it seems like India and the U.S. have finally agreed on the terms of reference for a bilateral trade agreement.
After all that back and forth, They've finally made some progress.
They have, and it comes just ahead of those reciprocal tariffs that the U.S. was planning to impose on India.
Which were supposed to kick in on April 2nd, 2025, right?
That's right. So this agreement, it's a bit of a last-minute reprieve.
So what did they agree on?
Well, the details are still being worked out, but it seems like India has agreed to lower tariffs on certain American goods.
In exchange for some concessions from the U.S., I presume.
Exactly. It's a give and take.
And it seems like the Prime Minister's office was directly involved in pushing this through.
They were. They recognized the importance of averting a trade war with the U.S.
But there's still some sticking points, right?
There are. The U.S. Trade Representative, they've released a report highlighting some of their concerns.
What are they worried about?
Well, things like import restrictions, barriers to digital trade, IP protection, regulations on dairy and agriculture.
So the usual suspects.
Pretty much. And they're also unhappy about India's high tariffs on some U.S. exports.
So there's still a lot to negotiate.
There is, but at least they're talking.
That's a good sign.
It is. And, India has to balance its own economic priorities with the need to maintain good relations with the U.S.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It is, and some experts are worried about the potential impact of this agreement on Indian farmers.
Yeah, if India opens up its agricultural market to more U.S. imports, that could hurt local producers.
It could. And there are also concerns about food safety standards.
Yeah, the U.S. and India have different regulations in that area.
They do, so it's going to be a complex negotiation.
No doubt about it.
Well, let's shift our focus to a more uplifting story.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The Siddhivinayak Temple Trust in Mumbai.
One of the most famous temples in India.
It is, and they've just announced record revenue.
Really? How much are we talking about?
A whopping 133 crore rupees for the fiscal year 2024-25.
That's a 15% increase from the previous year.
It is, and they're putting it down to efficient administration and better arrangements for darshan.
Darshan, that's the viewing of the deity, right?
It is, and they've made it a much smoother experience for devotees.
So more people are able to visit the temple and offer their donations.
That's right. And the donations come from various sources. The traditional dambati, the donation boxes, puja rituals, prasad sales, even online contributions and auctions.
So they've got a diversified revenue stream.
They do. And the deputy executive officer of the trust, Sandeep Rathod, he said that the smoother darshan experience has definitely contributed to the increase in donations.
It makes sense. If people have a positive experience, they're more likely to give generously.
Absolutely. And they're not even making a profit on the prasad sales.
Oh, really?
They're selling it at cost just to cover their expenses.
That's quite admirable.
It is. And they've also adjusted their revenue projections to account for inflation.
So they're being very prudent with their finances.
They are. And they're projecting even more growth next year. They're aiming for 154 crore rupees.
That's impressive.
It is. And all the money they earn, it goes towards various welfare activities.
So they're using their wealth to benefit the community.
Exactly. It's a great example of a religious institution giving back.
It is. Now let's talk about the Indian economy as a whole.
Okay, what's the outlook? Well, Moody's, the credit rating agency, they've just released their forecast for India's growth.
And?
They're predicting 6.5% growth for the current fiscal year.
That's pretty strong, isn't it?
It is, and they're saying that India would be the fastest growing economy among all the G20 nations.
So India's leading the pack.
It is, and they're attributing this growth to several factors, including favorable tax policies.
Which have been a focus of the government's economic agenda.
They have, and monetary easing by the Reserve Bank of India.
Making it easier for businesses to borrow and invest.
Exactly, and they've also highlighted India's ability to attract foreign capital.
Yeah, India's been a hot destination for investment lately.
It has, and, Moody's also acknowledged that the global economy is facing some headwinds.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty out there.
There is, but they believe that India is relatively insulated from these shocks.
Because of its strong domestic demand and its stable macroeconomic policies.
Exactly, and they're confident that India will continue to grow at a healthy pace.
Well, that's good news for India and for the world economy.
It is. Now, unfortunately, we have to end on a somber note.
Oh no, what's happened?
There's been a massive explosion at an illegal firecracker warehouse in Gujarat.
How awful.
It is. It happened in Disa, in the Banaskantha district.
And were there any casualties?
I'm afraid so. At least 21 people have been confirmed dead.
Oh dear, that's a terrible tragedy.
It is, and the worst part is that many of the victims were migrant laborers.
They were just trying to make a living.
They were. They had come from Madhya Pradesh to work at the warehouse.
And it turns out it was an illegal operation.
It was. They were manufacturing and storing firecrackers without the proper permits.
So no safety regulations, no oversight, a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And the explosion, it was so powerful that it completely destroyed the warehouse.
I can only imagine the scene.
It's horrific. And to make matters worse, the families of some of the workers were also living on the premises.
So there were women and children among the victims.
I'm afraid so.
This is just heartbreaking.
It is. And the rescue efforts have been very challenging.
Because of the scale of the destruction.
It is. The debris is everywhere, and there's still a risk of further explosions.
It's a nightmare scenario.
It is. And this tragedy really highlights the dangers of illegal and unregulated industries.
Absolutely. There needs to be a crackdown on these kinds of operations.
There does. Safety should always come first.
Well said. Well, let's try to end on a lighter note.
Okay, what do you have? The Maruti Suzuki WagonR. It's still the top-selling car in India.
Even with the rise of SUVs.
Even then, it seems like the humble hatchback still has a place in the hearts of Indian consumers.
Well, they're practical, they're affordable, they're easy to maneuver in crowded cities.
Exactly. And the WagonR, it's been a bestseller for years.
A classic.
It is, and it's sold almost 2 lakh units in the last fiscal year.
That's more than the Tata Punch and the Hyundai Creta?
It is, and those are both very popular SUVs.
So the WagonR is bucking the trend.
It is. It's the only non-SUV in the top 5 best-selling cars.
That's quite remarkable.
It is, and Maruti Suzuki, they're obviously very happy about it.
They are.
Their senior executive director for marketing and sales, Partho Banerjee, he said that Indian car buyers have diverse preferences.
And that there's still a strong market for hatchbacks.
Exactly, and SUVs might be all the rage right now,
Yeah.
but hatchbacks still make up a significant portion of the market.
Especially for first-time car buyers and people who mainly drive in urban areas.
It's exactly. Well, let's wrap up with one final story.
Okay, what is it?
Neelamban Parikh, the great-granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi, has passed away.
Oh, that's sad news.
It is. She was 93 years old.
And she lived a long and fulfilling life.
She did. She was a true Gandhian, dedicated to truth and social service.
She was the granddaughter of Haridas Gandhi, one of Mahatma Gandhi's sons.
That's right, and she lived in Navsari in Gujarat.
A place steeped in Gandhian history.
It is, and she was known for her commitment to women's welfare and human well-being.
So she really carried on her great-grandfather's legacy.
She did. She embodied his principles of nonviolence, truth, and compassion.
She will be missed.
She will. Now, before we go, I just want to mention one more thing.
What's that?
The Forbes billionaires list for 2025 is out.
Oh, the annual ranking of the world's richest people.
And there are some interesting takeaways for India.
Like what?
Well, the collective wealth of Indian billionaires has actually declined slightly this year.
Really?
Yeah, it's down to $941 billion from $954 billion last year.
So, a bit of a dip.
It is, and they're blaming it on the weaker rupee and a turbulent stock market.
Which has been affected by global factors, including the U.S. tariff situation.
Exactly. But even with this decline, Mukesh Ambani is still India's richest person.
He's been at the top for a while now.
He has, but his wealth has taken a hit. It's down by 20%.
Wow, that's still a lot of money.
It is. But Gautam Adani, he's suffered an even bigger loss.
Really?
Yeah, his fortune has shrunk by 1/3.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt.
It does, but there are some new entrants on the list this year.
Oh, who are they?
Well, Pavish Agrawal, the founder of Ola, the ride-hailing company.
He's been making waves in the tech sector.
He has. And Ronnie Scrivala, the media mogul.
And he's also a philanthropist and education reformer.
He is. And then there's Harish Ahuja, the co-founder of Avenue Supermarts.
That's the company that runs the D-Mart chain.
It is. And some familiar names have also returned to the list.
Like who?
Satish Mehta, the founder of Torrent Pharma.
So it's a mix of old money and new money.
It is, and it shows that the Indian economy is still creating wealth.
Despite the challenges.
Despite them. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground.
We did, from cricket to trade wars to temple finances.
And everything in between.
It's been a whirlwind tour of India.
And it just shows how dynamic and diverse this country is.
It does, and as always, we encourage you to think about these stories and what they mean for India's future.
What trends are emerging, what challenges lie ahead, and what opportunities are there for growth and progress.
These are all important questions to consider.
And we hope that our deep dive has given you some food for thought.
We do. So until next time, stay informed and stay curious.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.